Shalom. First and foremost, I like to give our praise and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem HaKadosh, Yahweh, being the true name of the world only calls God, Ba'ashem being the name of, and Yahushai being the true name of our Lord and Savior, the world only calls Jesus, and HaKadosh being the Holy Spirit. More respect to you, Akim and Aglaphon, you brothers and sisters, pushing the work of the Lord in true faith, sincerity, and sincere, and, peace and blessings, to you hopeful elect, man. You sincere, hopeful elect. But ultimately, in this lesson, we're basically going over how we have to ultimately beware of these Jezebels, man. It's for you, like, especially as brothers, man. We gotta be careful of these Jezebels. We gotta beware, man, because ultimately, in the times that we're in, and even any time, man, whether it be ancient time or modern time, man, there's always been women, who were ultimately certain agents, man. You know, ultimately agents, to ultimately take us down, man. Notice how, a very smart mastermind, that's ultimately trying to take someone or something down. They're ultimately gonna bring a woman, man, showing how deceptive ultimately women are, because they're used, as a weapon to ultimately take men down, man. You see it all the time in superhero movies, action movies. There's always a woman being sent to ultimately try to take down a man. You see it in James Bond all the time, but ultimately we have to be strong enough to ultimately, combat, and ultimately resist these women, man. You know, because I know, man, it be hard sometimes, but you have to ultimately stay woke, at the end of the day, and ultimately protect your energy, man. Not only protect your energy, but protect your spirit, man. Because this is not just you know, a physical fight. We're only fighting only. This is ultimately a spiritual fight, man. And these women, many of them are demons, man. And they're out here to ultimately take you down, man. Lower your spirit, man. Lower your consciousness, man. So ultimately, we gotta be careful of these women. In this lesson, I'm also gonna mention, our examples from our forefathers, man. You know, to ultimately, warn you brothers, man. Just warn everyone, because especially in the times that we're going into Jacob's trouble, we're ultimately gonna be, most wanted, man. We're gonna be America's most wanted. One day you're gonna see your face on TV, and ultimately Esau is gonna try to catch you, man. And Esau is gonna ultimately use women, as a vessel to ultimately take you down, a weapon to take you down, man. So we gotta be careful, man, because ultimately we're agents. We're spiritual agents of Yahweh Bashim Shah, secret agents, man. So we have to ultimately stay woke, man. And ultimately not fall for the traps, from these women's, man. You know, because women, man, they're very deceptive, man. Very, very deceptive. So we have to ultimately watch out for these Jezebels, man. And now let's go into the scriptures. Let's go to the book of Ephesians, chapter 6 and verse 12. Ephesians, chapter 6 and verse 12, and it reads, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places," man. So ultimately, man, as the base of the scripture means, as I break it down, when it says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, we necessarily, don't fight against flesh and blood, man. You know, not only do we, fight against flesh and blood, this is ultimately a spiritual battle, man. The main war field, the main, battlefield is in the spiritual realm, man. So ultimately, man, we fight against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of this world, man, and against spiritual wickedness, meaning that this is ultimately a spiritual fight, man, meaning that demons are ultimately going to try, to test us, man. Demons will hop on these women, and these women will be possessed by these demons to ultimately take you down, you know. Demons, like the Jezebel spirit. The Jezebel spirit is going to try to, take your energy. You ever heard of a succubus or an incubus? These are all demons, sexual demons, to ultimately take you down and ultimately take your energy, man, and try to lower your spirit. So ultimately, we're continuing to fight against, spiritual demons, man. Because at the end of the day, this is a spiritual fight. Because ultimately it's these spirits that ultimately control, these physical things that we see are present. If you see someone doing some outlandish shit, that's a demon that's on them, man. So ultimately the Lord created spirits, man. For a reason to handle His work, man. But ultimately we're fighting a spiritual fight, man. So ultimately we have to protect our spirits because ultimately these women, are demons, man. You gotta stay woke, man. You gotta really stay woke, you know, and ultimately resist these demons, man. And now let's go to the book of go to the book of all right, let's go to the book of we go to the book of Proverbs, chapter 31 and verse 30. This book of Proverbs, chapter 31 and verse 30, and it reads, "Favor is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord shall be praised," man. So ultimately, man, beauty is vain. Favor is deceitful. Beauty is deceitful, man. So ultimately, you're not supposed to look upon the appearance of a woman just because, oh, she got a big booty. She got big, chancletas and shit like that, man. You're not supposed to, look at that, man. You're supposed to ultimately look at her spirit because that's ultimately what defines, a woman, man. It's her spirit, man. Because ultimately all these looks and stuff are meant to deceive you, man. They're meant to deceive you, you know? They're meant to deceive you at the end of the day and ultimately try to take your energy, ox, you brothers out there. So you got to stay woke, especially, man, when you got when you have your energy up high, man, as the scriptures have says, wisdom causes a man's face to shine. These women will come, unto you and try to ultimately take your energy, man. So you got to be careful, man. You can't just be out here popping anything. You have to ultimately examine, their spirits because at the end of the day, the act of intercourse is a very spiritual thing. So if you effing to go with demons, man, those demons are gonna hop upon you, man. These demons are gonna hop upon you, so you gotta be careful. Well, ultimately, the women you deal with, man. You gotta observe them heavy, man. Because they will try to come and ultimately take your soul, man. I have a testimony that this brother I knew, man. So he fell out the truth. He's a bug out, but ultimately, man, he, while he was teaching, while he was doing the work, he ended up, effing this Edomite, man. Obviously, there's nothing, wrong, about, popping, a heathen woman, popping the Edomite, because ultimately, you can pop an Edomite, but you cannot, marry these heathens, man. You cannot marry them. You can use it. They're as concubines, but ultimately we're in captivity, so it shouldn't be the time to be popping heathen women, and having concubines, man. Right now, that's not in the spirit we're supposed to be. As scripture says, you men be ye as ye have no wives, man. Give me my coat, bro. Watch out. Get out. Yeah, Salak, man. Yeah, yeah, but ultimately, man, yeah. So he basically, as I'm saying the story, I'm gonna rephrase the story, but basically, man, he went and popped a Edomite, man, and after, man, she basically took his soul, and he said that, man. He was like, yo, she basically took my soul, man, and ultimately he hasn't been the same ever since, man. So that's meaning, man, these women, are demons, man. You got to be careful with the women that you deal with because they're ultimately going to try to take your soul, man. And these women these women out here, man, are trained to ultimately snatch your soul, man. You know, because ultimately when you notify a female, man, you're basically giving her power. She's taking your energy, she's taking your strength, man. You know, and you gotta be careful. You can't give your strength to anything, man. And if you are dealing with a woman, you got to make sure, the strength that you're giving unto her can ultimately be replenished, so ultimately go back to you, man. And it can be in a perfect, cycle, man. But, you got to be careful with the women you deal with, man, because a lot of these women are succubus and incubuses, man, or Jezebels, man. So you got to be careful, man. because ultimately beauty is deceitful, man. And now let's go to verse 3. Let's go to the book of Proverbs chapter 31 and verse 3. This is Solomon speaking, man. King Solomon, he had plenty of women, man. He had plenty of women. So he definitely should know about women. So ultimately, we're out to take his advice, man. And this is the book of Proverbs chapter 31 and verse 3. And it reads, "Give not thy strength unto women." So ultimately, you're not supposed to give thy strength unto women, nor thy ways to which destroyeth kings, man. So ultimately, man, you're not supposed to give your strength unto women, you know, nor your ways, to that which destroyeth kings, man. Because ultimately, man, when you give your strength to women, that's what ultimately destroyeth kings. And, when it says, destroyeth kings, that ultimately shows, that, if you look at any present time, whether it be present time, ancient time, you know, a woman, there's various accounts of women ultimately causing men to fall off, man, causing men, to fall off at the high, gratitude that they were, man. So ultimately, you're not supposed to give your strength unto these women because ultimately they will destroy you, man. So you have to ultimately examine, the woman that you're dealing with, and ultimately you have to understand that this is a spiritual fight, man. Demons are everywhere, and demons are mostly going to be upon these women, man. These Jezebel spirits will be on this woman to ultimately take your energy, ox. So you gotta stay woke, man. Especially in the times that we're gonna come. We're gonna be America's most wanted, and Esau is gonna use a woman, to ultimately deceive you, man, and be as a weapon to ultimately, cause you to fall, man. So ultimately, you're not supposed to give your strength to these women, because ultimately, what leads to the destroying, the detriment of kings, man. And this is also what happened this is, for example, we're gonna read the story of Samson, man. Samson, he got beguiled by a woman, which caused him to lose his strength and lose his powers, man. That, like, there was a point of time, Samson, he had spiritual power, man. He had super strength. The Lord blessed him with super strength, man. And ultimately a woman beguiled him, and deceived him, causing him to lose his powers, man, because he was under the Nazarite oath, that he wasn't supposed to cut his hair, and a woman ultimately cut his hair, and we're going to read that, man. We're going to read the story of Samson, but ultimately we're not supposed to give thy strength unto women, nor thy ways, man. So you're not supposed to give your ways, to these women, man. Ultimately, if you're dealing with women, it's best to not tell them anything, man. You see superheroes are not quick. You never see Batman, quick to ultimately tell a woman, his secret identity, man. Ultimately, we're not supposed to be telling these women, our ways. We're supposed to be mysterious, man. We're supposed to be mysterious. We're not supposed to be out here telling our whole mind to these women, man. Because these women could be agents, man. These women could ultimately be agents to ultimately take you down, man. So you have to be careful, man. And ultimately, do not spill, all your beans to a woman, man. Do not tell her everything about you. You're not supposed to tell anyone everything about you, man, whether it be man or woman, because, you could be educating an enemy, man. You got to be careful what you say, because ultimately you could be educating an enemy, man. So this is crazy, man. Now I'm starting to know, man, this is really a spiritual fight. It's really us against the world, man. Everyone's against us, so we got to be careful, man. We're not like normal people anymore, man. We have spiritual power now, man. We have superpowers now, man. We can't move just like regular people. We always got to be on our P's and Q's, box. And now let's transition to the book of Judges chapter 16 and go into the story of Samson, man. Samson is a prime example. And when we were reading the book of Proverbs, that was that was Solomon, that's the book, Solomon wrote, man. One of the books Solomon wrote, and Solomon dealt with many women. And he said that for a reason. And whether, you can see it or not, whether you have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, that ultimately is King Solomon is Yahweh Shai, man, in the reincarnation. Was Yahweh Shai, in the reincarnation. Yahweh Shai was King Solomon, man. You know, so this is spiritual because when Yahweh Shai was Solomon, he dwelt with many women. But then, you know, due to Solomon, when Solomon committed iniquity and Solomon sinned, so when Yahweh Shai, when King Solomon came as Yahweh Shai on the scene, through reincarnation, Yahweh Shai dwelt with no women, man. Yahweh Shai dwelt with no women, and he was ultimately perfect. He was so perfect enough, that the Lord made him the sacrificial lamb of Israel, man. So that's crazy, man, because he already learned from iniquity that he had done, and he had so much women to the point that when he came as a scene as Yahweh Shai, he dwelt with no women, man. He didn't bust a nut for 33 years, man. And Yahweh Shai, he retained his seed, meaning that he didn't have intercourse for 33 years, man. Because ultimately he didn't need that, man. But ultimately, I'm not saying, you can't get your rocks off, but in these times, you got to be careful, with the women you deal with, man. And ultimately, if you do deal with women, do not tell them all about your life, man. You tell them certain things, but you don't, especially you don't tell them the truth, that you do the truth immediately. They could be agents, man. Hired by the devil, man. So you got to be careful, man. But now we're gonna go to the book of Judges, chapter 16, man. Yahweh Shai, man. You don't think women were trying to test him, and all that. Jezebels trying to hop on him, but he still resisted, man. We gotta be strong enough to resist. You can't be weary out here and letting these women, ultimately take you down like that, man. You got niggas out here being simps and shit. I'm gonna make a lesson on that later. Being a simp is off according to the scriptures, man. That's off. That's against God, man. To be a simp. But let's go to the book of Judges, chapter 16, man, to show you the story of Samson and what Samson experienced, man, because ultimately we have to learn from our forefathers, man. The things written aforetime, was written for our learning, man. So ultimately, all these scriptures, that I read, thousands of years ago, were ultimately for us to learn, man, and ultimately learn from these experiences that our forefathers went through, man. But now let's read the book of Judges, chapter 16, starting at the first verse. This book of Judges, chapter 16 and 1, and it reads, "Then went Samson to Gaza, and saw there an harlot, and went in unto her." So, Samson, he went to Gaza, and he saw a harlot, and he went unto her, man. So ultimately, according to the scriptures, man, you can have a prostitute according to the scriptures. Hosea had prostitutes, and all that, concubines and all that, man. In verse 2, "And it was told the Gazites, saying, Samson is come hither. And they compassed him in, and laid wait for him all night in the gate of the city, and were quiet all the night, saying, in the morning, when it is day, we shall kill him," man. So the Gazites, man, when Samson basically came into their territory, they basically were planning, to ultimately take him down and kill him, man. Niggas have always been against Jake. Niggas has always been against the righteous, man. In verse 3, "And Samson lay till midnight, and arose at midnight, and took the doors of the gate of the city, and the two posts, and went with them bar, and all, and put them upon his shoulders, and carried them up to the top of an hill that is before Hebron." In verse 4, "And it came to pass afterward that he loved a woman in the valley of Shorek, whose name was Delilah. And the lords of the Philistines came up upon her, and said unto her, Entice him, and see wherein his great strength lieth, and by what means we may prevail against him, that we may bind him to afflict him, and we will give thee every one of his. In verse 5, and the lords of the Philistines came up unto her and said unto her, entice him and see where in his strength, great strength lieth, man. So the Lord of the Philistines, basically used Delilah, which was, a woman that, you know, Samson loved, man. So ultimately, man, that shows they're gonna use the people closest unto you, to ultimately take you down, man. So ultimately, people around you, man, you gotta examine your surroundings, man, because it could be the closest people around you that could be your biggest enemies and ultimately be an agent to ultimately take you down. So so ultimately, man, the Philistines came onto her and said entice him, basically deceive him, you know, and see where his great strength lieth, man. So they basically wanted to see, where what was his strength, what gave him his strength. And continue on the verse, and by what means we may prevail against him, that we may bind him to afflict him, man. So, they're basically trying to find his weakness, basically his kryptonite, so they can ultimately prevail against him and take him down, so they can afflict him. And we will give thee every one of his 1,100 pieces of silver. So ultimately, they said, if you entice him, basically you deceive him, and ultimately find out what his weakness is, we're ultimately gonna reward you with all his money, you know. And Samson had a lot of money, man. In verse 6, and Delilah said to Samson, tell me, I pray thee, where thy great strength lieth, and wherewith thou mightest be bound to afflict thee, man. So basically, she asked Samson, man, like what's your strength, man? What's your, what gives you, what gives you the strength, man? Basically question him. In verse 7, and Samson said unto her, if they bend me with 7 green whiffs that never dried, then I shall be weak as another man. In verse 8, so basically, Samson lied. Samson lied, man. He lied to her, and that's a smart move. Because in his head, he's like, yo, why is she asking me, this? Why is she asking me this? Because Samson knew at first that ultimately what she was doing, he knew. He knew, man. And he basically lied to her, in verse 8. Then the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 green whiffs, which had not been dried, and she bound with them. In verse 9, now there were men lying in wait, abiding with her in the chamber. And she said unto him, the Philistines shall be upon thee, Samson, and he break the withs, as a thread of tow is broken when it toucheth the fire. So his strength was not known, man. So they tried to do the lie, Samson told them. But ultimately they knew, they was like, damn, this ain't his weakness. In verse 10, and Delilah said unto Samson, behold, thou hast mocked me and told me lies. And now tell me, I pray thee, wherewith thou mightest be bound, man. So Delilah was like, damn, you lied to me, man. You mocked me. And now tell me the truth, basically. In verse 11, and he said unto her, if they bind me fast with the new ropes that never were occupied, then shall I be weak and be as another man. So Samson told another lie, man. In verse 12, Delilah took therefore new ropes and bound him therewith, and said unto him, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And they were liars in wait, abiding in the chamber, and he break them off of his arms like a thread. So basically, he was like, yo, the ropes are what give me, weakness. And he basically trolled them. And he just ripped the ropes off of him like there was nothing. In verse 13, and Delilah said unto Samson, hit herto, thou hast mocked me and told me lies. Tell me wherewith thou mightest be proud, be bound. And he said unto her, if thou weavest the 7 locks of my head with the web, so basically, she caught on to like, damn, he just told me another lie. The lie was like, damn, he told me another lie, man. But then Samson said unto her, if thou weavest the 7 locks of my head with the web, man. So he basically said, if you basically braid my hair, because this ultimately cuts, the claim, the theory that ultimately Samson had dreadlocks. No, because if you go into the word locks in this context, it translates to locks or plaits. I mean braids or plaits, braids or plaits. So meaning that he asked for seven braids, 7 box braids in his head. So he was like, yo, if you braid my hair, shorty, I'll tell you my strength. I'll tell you what gives me strength. In verse 14, and she fastened it with the pin and said unto him, the Philistines be upon thee. Samson, he awaked out of his sleep and went away with the pin of the beam and with the web. So at the end of the day, he got his hair braided, and still nothing happened. She seen still that he didn't have any weakness. In verse 15, and she said unto him, how can thou say I love thee when thy heart is not with me, and thou hast mocked me these 3 times, and has not told me wherein thy great strength lieth, man. So basically, she was like, damn, how you gonna lie to me 3 times and then say you love me? How you gonna say you love me and you're not telling me the truth? Because you haven't told me where your strength lieth, man. In verse 16, and it came to pass, she pressed him daily with her words and urged him, so that his soul was vexed unto death, man. So she kept bugging this dude, months, probably for months, asking him every day, asking him every day, what's your strength? What's basically annoying him till his soul was vexed, to the point that she was so annoying to him, to the point that he just told her. And that's how these women are. So you got to be careful. You got to have that endurance, to ultimately deal with, these tests, and the annoyingness of these women, man. You can't fold at all, man. But Samson ended up folding, man. In verse 17, and this is where Samson messed up at first. He was doing the right thing, basically not telling her, the secret, because ultimately Samson knows, you're not supposed to tell, your secrets like that, man. But then the reason why he ended up telling her, is because she kept annoying him to the point that his soul was vexed, man. In verse 17, that he told her all his hearts, and said unto her, there hath not come a razor upon my head. So basically, he told his whole heart, and he said unto her, there has not come a razor upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite unto God from my mother's womb. If I be shaven, then my strength will go from me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. So ultimately, he ended up telling, his secret. He ended up telling, he ended up giving his enemy his kryptonite, man. How Superman has a weakness, which is kryptonite. That's the only thing that can put him down. Basically the razor, basically cutting his hair was ultimately his kryptonite, man. So ultimately, man, he was under a Nazarite oath, meaning that he wasn't wasn't supposed to cut his hair, man. A razor was not supposed to be upon his head. So, and basically, if he shaves his hair, then he's gonna become weak. He's gonna lose his strength, man. It's ultimately gonna be kryptonite unto him. In verse 18, and when Delilah saw that he had told her all his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up this once, for he have shewed me all his heart. Then the lords of the Philistines came up unto her and brought money in their hand, man. So ultimately, as soon as she got, she took this dude's, she basically took this dude's heart. She basically took his soul, and ultimately found out what his weakness was. She went and told the lords, man, of the Philistines that were trying to take him down. So ultimately she got what she wanted, and she ultimately got the money that she was promised by the Philistines, man. In verse 19, and she made him sleep upon her knees, and she called for her man, and she caused him to shave off the 7 locks of his head, and she began to afflict him, and his strength went from him, man. So she made him sleep, right? Upon her knees. She was basically trying to comfort him, man. Basically, got him to ultimately pillow talk. You can't be out here pillow talking, man. And she called for a man. So after, she took this nigga's seed, he was sleeping. She called for a man, and she caused him to shave all the 7 locks of his head. So ultimately, she called the man to ultimately shave all his hair, which was his strength. And she began to afflict him. So she started afflicting him, man. And his strength went from him, man. So she basically took his powers, man. Took his energy, in verse 20. And she said, the Philistines be upon thee, Samson. And he woke out of his sleep and said, I will go out as the other times before and shake myself. And he wist not that the Lord was not departed from him. In verse 21, so ultimately, he was like, I will go out as the other times before and shake myself. So this time he thought that, I can get away with this. The Lord's not gonna, stop dealing with me. That's what Samson thought, but ultimately he knew, that was the oath that he was supposed to keep, to ultimately not shave his hair, because he was under the Nazarite oath. That's a hardcore oath at that time, man. Basically, if you didn't keep that oath, you basically broke the code of Yahweh Shemiel Shai, then the Lord's gonna stop dealing with you. And basically Samson thought that the Lord, was not gonna, depart from him. But ultimately the Lord, ultimately said, nah, fuck that shit, man. You broke the oath. You revealed your secret identity. You blew your cover, man. You blew your cover. In verse 21, but the Philistines took him and put out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza and bound him with feathers of brass, and he did grind in the prison house, man. So ultimately, man, they took the Philistines ended up taking him because he didn't have strength anymore, man. He didn't have strength anymore. He didn't have strength anymore, and yeah, and they took out his eyes, man. They basically took his eyeballs out, man. His freaking eye socket, man. And brought him down to Gaza and bound him with feathers of brass and grinded him in his prison. So they basically tortured him, man. They tortured him, and ultimately took his powers, man. They took his powers, man. And ultimately, they brought him into prison and tortured him. But this is all, he ended up getting, his he ended up getting, his powers back eventually. You can read that. You can be feel free to read it. The rest of the chapter. Basically reading on the book of Judges. But at the end of the day, moral of this, man, basically, man, you're not supposed to give, your strength to women, which destroy kings. And we've seen this is what happened to Samson. Samson ended up losing his whole life because of him revealing his secrets unto a woman, man. Because the whole time that woman was an agent. So we have to learn from this, ultimately learn from the experience that Samson went through, man. You know, because this is what led to his downfall. He ended up losing his whole life. You know, even though he regained his strength back and he basically fought 100 men. He fought 100 men. You know, but he ended up dying, man. You know, he ended up dying. You know, but all of this, you know, his perishment, his death, you know, was all because he revealed his secrets, you know, unto a woman, man. You know, so this is why you got to be careful, man, because these women will be your downfall. Look at Solomon. You know, he let the women ultimately take his soul, and Solomon wasn't going after for popping, you know, heathen women. He was popping Edomites, he was popping Moabites, he was popping Ishmaelites, all those, you know, women, man. You know, as concubines. But ultimately, what got him going off the way he went off is because he started serving the gods, you know, that these heathen women served, man. So ultimately, this is why we got to be careful around these with these women, because ultimately they will cause you to fall, man. You know, they will ultimately take your soul, you know, and take your energy, man, and ultimately not, you know, the as the scripture says, adulterous woman wiped her mouth and said she have done nothing, man. So ultimately, this the mindset that these women have, man. They're here to ultimately be agents and ultimately take your seed, man. You know, take your energy, man, and take your strength, man. So with that, Lord only ratified to give all praise and glory to Yahweh, Bashim Shai, Bashim Kakadash. Stay up, Akim. You know, stay, beware of these Jezebels, man. Death to America. Shalom.